I refused to be part of my neighbor's lawsuit against the developer. Days later, my sewer line was slashed, my walls soaked with backflow, and my home declared uninhabitable. But what the plumber pulled from the pipe wasn't just a coincidence. I've lived in Port St. Lucie, Florida since 2006. Bought my house back when the area was still under development. Back then, it was just a mix of half-finished homes and empty lots. The streets were new, the trees were small, and you had to drive 10 minutes just to get to a decent grocery store. It was quiet, peaceful. I liked that. I worked as an HVAC tech my whole life. Paid my bills on time. Didn't throw loud parties. Took care of my house. Painted it myself every few years. Cut my own lawn. Nothing special, just a modest one-story, beige stucco place with a screened-in porch and a 2-car garage. I figured I'd live there the rest of my life. Maybe retire, get a boat. That kind of dream. Everything was fine until about 2 years ago when a developer bought the open lot across the drainage canal behind my property. There used to be wild palms and thick underbrush back there, even some turtles and birds. Then suddenly it was bulldozers, cement trucks, and floodlights all hours of the night. They built these modern-looking townhouses. Big, tall things, white with black trim and glass balconies. Not my taste, but I didn't care. I figured progress is progress. Maybe my property value would go up. Sure, the construction was loud and messy, but I didn't complain. That's life. But my next-door neighbor, Chris Langford, lost his mind over it. Chris moved in about 6 years ago. Ex-military, he said, ran his own pest control business now. Had a big wraparound truck with his logo on it, and his face giving a thumbs up. Loud guy. Always had something to say about everything. He was the kind of neighbor who watched everyone else's house, but never mowed his own lawn. When the development started, he knocked on my door holding a binder full of documents. Said he was organizing a class action lawsuit against the developer. Something about illegal zoning, environmental violations, runoff, threatening our foundations. He claimed it was a money grab by the city and that homeowners like us were being pushed out slowly. I listened. I told him I appreciated him doing the legwork, but I didn't want to get involved in any lawsuit. He looked surprised. Told me I'd be leaving money on the table, that we could each see a 5-figure payout if we stood united. I shook my head. Told him straight. I wasn't comfortable joining something based on speculation. He got this look in his eyes. Cold. Then he said, "You siding with them?" I told him, "No, Chris, I just don't think this is the right way." That was the start of it. Over the next few days, I noticed the tone changed. He stopped waving when I pulled in. Didn't return my good mornings. A few other neighbors joined his effort. They started talking about me behind my back. I'd catch whispers when I walked my dog. I heard one of them call me a developer sympathizer, like I was the enemy. Still, I kept to myself. I figured it would blow over. Then 3 days after that last conversation with Chris, everything went to hell. I woke up early on a Wednesday because something smelled off. At first, I thought my dog had gotten sick. But as I stepped out of bed and walked toward the hallway, I felt it. Moisture under my feet. My socks were soaked. I flipped on the light and saw that the entire hallway carpet was drenched in this dark, brownish sludge. The smell hit me full force, raw sewage. I ran to the guest bathroom and found the toilet bubbling. Not just water. Waste. Thick, black liquid had overflowed onto the floor. The tub was filled halfway up with it too. My heart was pounding. I checked the living room. Same thing. The baseboards were wet. Water dripping from the ceiling vent. Something was horribly wrong. I called emergency plumbing right away. They came in hazmat suits, serious guys. One of them told me my sewer line had been cut clean. Not corroded, not crushed. Someone went in and cut this like they knew what they were doing, he said. The break was under the front lawn, close to the street. That didn't make sense. Why would someone do that? Then the adjuster came from my insurance company. After looking through the house and all the damages, he shook his head and said, "You can't stay here. Not until this is gutted and rebuilt. This is a Category 3 biohazard." It didn't even feel real. I packed a few bags, grabbed my dog, and checked into a cheap hotel nearby. My house, the one I spent years working on, the one I thought I'd retire in, was ruined. And the worst part was, I didn't have proof of anything. Just a bad feeling in my gut. Until 3 days later. The plumber came back with a camera scope. Said they needed to inspect the rest of the sewer line to be sure there weren't other issues. About 20 minutes into the job, he called me over and said, "You're going to want to see this." He pulled out something from deep in the pipe. It was wet, slimy, but still legible. A piece of thick, glossy paper. Red and black. Part of a door flyer. The same kind Chris had been handing out around the neighborhood. Stop the townhomes and fight back. Join the lawsuit. I recognized the font. The layout. Even the torn edge matched the ones I'd seen in my mailbox. There was also a piece of fishing line tied to it, like someone had fed it deep into the pipe through an access point. I asked the plumber what would happen if someone did that. He said, if you shove something like this in and tie it off, then cut the line upstream, it'll build pressure. When it breaks loose, everything in the line comes back inside. My chest went tight. I didn't say anything to him, just thanked him, paid the invoice, and took the flyer with me. I knew right then, this wasn't bad luck. It was personal. And I was going to make sure Chris Langford paid for it. Every single drop of it. I didn't tell anyone what I found. Not yet. I needed time to think. I stayed in that motel for the next 3 weeks. Cheap place off US. 1. Smelled like mildew and stale smoke, but it took dogs and didn't ask questions. I'd come home once or twice a week with gloves and a mask to grab mail and check on things. The house still stank. I couldn't even walk inside without gagging. Mold had already set in. Every time I pulled into the driveway, I saw Chris's truck sitting pretty next door, like nothing had happened. He was outside more than usual, hosing down his driveway, trimming his hedges, polishing his damn truck. He always looked over when I pulled in, smiled like he knew something. I kept my head down, didn't react, but I was watching him. I set up 2 outdoor cameras on my house, one pointed at the side facing his yard, another covering my front lawn. I also went to a friend who worked in IT and had him help me get an old iPhone rigged up as a hidden camera inside my garage window, aiming straight at the shared property line. Then I got serious. I filed a quiet report with the sheriff's office. Not accusing him, just documenting the vandalism and the plumber's findings. They wrote it down but said unless I had direct proof, it would be hard to press charges. So I got to work. The flyer and fishing line I'd kept sealed in a Ziploc, stored in my safe. I took photos, scanned it, made notes. I also pulled every door flyer I could find from my mail drawer. Compared the tiers, fonts, paper weight, all matched. I even asked a forensic print guy, an old buddy from high school who now works for the state, if prints could survive sewer water. He told me, maybe partials, maybe not. But keep it dry, and you might get lucky. I knew that alone wouldn't be enough. Chris was smart. He wouldn't brag. Wouldn't confess, but he couldn't hide everything. One night, around 2 a.m., I checked my garage camera feed from the motel. I saw movement. Chris was in my yard. He didn't break in. He walked along the edge of the property like he was just out for a stroll, but I could tell he was checking my lawn, probably seeing if the damage stuck, probably laughing to himself. What he didn't see was that I'd moved the sewer access cap and marked it with a little red dot, just enough so I could tell if anyone messed with it. The next morning, the mark was gone. That's when I knew he wasn't finished. So I set the bait. I called the developer, yes, the same one his lawsuit was targeting, and told them I was reconsidering joining the case. I asked for a meeting. I made sure to say it loud enough while standing on my lawn, phone to my ear, just as Chris pulled into his driveway. Then I sent a letter to the HOA, copied to every house on the street. It said I'd been advised by legal counsel and wanted to inform neighbors that I was keeping records of all property damage and conflicts related to the recent development. Just professional enough to sound serious, just vague enough to keep Chris guessing. Within 2 days, my car windshield was cracked. Not shattered, just a long, slow curve like something sharp and heavy had been placed and twisted. Insurance said maybe a tree limb. I knew better. That same week, my hotel room got a call in the middle of the night. No voice, just heavy breathing. And then, worst of all, I got a visit from the county. Someone filed a formal complaint saying I had unpermitted construction and illegal waste disposal. The officer said it was an anonymous tip. I had to let them walk the property. They didn't find anything, because there was nothing to find. But it still went on my record. Still triggered a review with my insurer. Chris was playing hardball. But what he didn't know was that I'd already hired a private investigator. A guy named Daryl. Retired cop. Quiet. Expensive, but worth every penny. Daryl followed Chris for a week. Got photos of him dumping something into a storm drain near the canal. Talked to some of Chris's old coworkers. Turns out he was fired from another pest company years ago for doing shady work, unlicensed fogging, tampering with traps. Even a customer complained about property damage. We also found out something else. Chris's business? Not in good shape. He was drowning in debt. That lawsuit he was pushing? It wasn't just about principle, it was about money. Desperation. He needed a payout bad. And if I could prove sabotage, that lawsuit and his credibility would crumble. I was close. But I needed one more thing. A confession. Or something just as good. 2 weeks later, I got my break. And it came from someone I never expected. I was grabbing a coffee at the Dunkin' down the street, just trying to stay sane in the middle of all this, when a guy in line behind me tapped my shoulder. "Hey, you live on Heather Glen Drive, right?" he asked. I turned, cautious. "Yeah, what?" He introduced himself as Miguel. Worked with the city's water and sanitation department. Said he'd seen my name on the recent incident report. Then he leaned in a little and said, "I probably shouldn't say this, but you didn't hear it from me." He told me a work order had come in a month ago. Someone requested a routine city-side inspection of the sewer access line for my address. Nothing unusual, except it wasn't me who requested it. The person who did? Chris Langford. He gave them my address, claimed he was helping a neighbor handle a recurring issue, and convinced someone in the office to flag it without requiring ID. The city marked the cap for open access 3 days before my backflow disaster. That was the missing piece. Chris had posed as me, used city workers to clear the way, then went back later and sabotaged the pipe himself. It was the only way he could have done it that clean. I thanked Miguel, didn't press him. I knew he'd already stuck his neck out. I took that info straight to Daryl. He pulled some strings, got the time-stamped work order through a contact at City Hall. Now I had a paper trail linking Chris directly to the sewer access just days before the damage. But then the story took a darker turn. Daryl called me 2 nights later. Said I needed to see something in person. He picked me up, and we drove to a different part of town. Not far. Just over the bridge into a smaller, run-down neighborhood. He parked across from a duplex. "That's Chris's ex-wife's place," he said. I didn't even know Chris had been married. Daryl told me she left him 3 years ago. Restraining order, accusations of harassment, even a police report claiming he keyed her car and slashed her tires after she filed for divorce. Then he showed me something worse. Photos. Recent. Chris had been parking near her house late at night. Sitting in his truck with the lights off. One night he got out and left something on her front step. Daryl got a close-up. It was a dead rat in a Ziploc bag. Left by a pest control guy. Message received. I wasn't just dealing with a petty neighbor. I was dealing with someone dangerous. Obsessed. Vengeful. Someone who played dirty when he felt powerless. The next twist came that weekend. A letter showed up at my P.O. box. No return address, just typed and printed on plain white paper. Inside were photos. Photos of me. At the hotel. Walking my dog. Sitting in my truck. One was taken from inside a car. Someone had been following me. There was a note. "You should have stayed quiet. This doesn't end the way you think." I stared at it for a long time. Chris had gone from sabotage to stalking. He wanted me afraid. Wanted me off balance. But what he didn't know, what he never counted on, was that I'd been collecting everything. Patiently. Quietly. And I was nearly ready. But before I made my move, I needed one last confirmation. Something undeniable. I decided to bait him into revealing himself. So I made up a fake letter. Looked like it came from the developer's legal team. Said I was cooperating in their investigation and providing key testimony. I printed 2 copies. One I left taped to my motel room door. The other? I walked over, middle of the day, and accidentally dropped it on Chris's lawn while he was outside. He picked it up. Read it. Didn't say a word. But that night, my motel room window was shattered. And that was the final mistake he'd ever make. The next morning, I stood in front of my busted motel window and made 2 phone calls. First, to Daryl. Second, to my lawyer. I'd already been gathering evidence for weeks. Photos, documents, timelines. I handed everything over. The sewer sabotage, the work order from the city, the door flyer pulled from my pipe, the fishing line, the stalking photos, and now, the shattered glass from my motel window. We even had the fake city inspection request traced back to a known IP address from Chris's home Wi-Fi, thanks to a tech expert Daryl brought in. The lawyer put together a full report and sent it to the county sheriff's department. This time, I wasn't just filing a quiet report. This was a criminal complaint. Vandalism, property destruction, harassment, impersonation, stalking. And because Chris ran a licensed pest control business, I also forwarded it all to the state licensing board. I didn't stop there. I sent a sealed packet of evidence to the developer's legal team, the same team Chris had been suing. They'd been tiptoeing around the lawsuit, unsure of how much weight it had. But when they saw what I sent, especially the city work order and the forged name, they acted fast. Within a week, Chris's civil lawsuit against the developer was dropped, voluntarily withdrawn, pending legal review. His name was suddenly toxic. The neighbors who had joined his effort stopped answering his calls. The fallout came quickly. The county sheriff's office showed up at his door with a search warrant. He was arrested in front of his house. I watched from my lawn, silent, as they cuffed him and loaded him into the cruiser. His truck was impounded. His pest control license was suspended within days. Then the news broke. Local station did a story on contractor turned neighborhood menace. They showed his mugshot, mentioned the sabotage, the stalking, the ongoing investigation. His face was on the evening news next to the headline, "Lawsuit leader accused of targeted vandalism." And me? I didn't hide. I rebuilt. Insurance, after reviewing the evidence, agreed to pay out the full amount, plus temporary housing compensation. The developer sent contractors to help gut and rebuild my home, free of charge. Said it was the right thing to do after everything I'd been through. Took 5 months, but I moved back in. New floors, new walls, even repainted the whole place. Fresh start. Neighbors came around, quiet and awkward. A few apologized. I nodded, said little. I wasn't interested in being anyone's friend. As for Chris, he lost everything. His business folded. Reviews flooded online, tanking his name. His ex-wife filed new charges after seeing his face on TV. Last I heard, he took a plea deal, 2 years probation, mandatory therapy, restitution payments. Couldn't go near me or my property again. He left the neighborhood. House was sold in foreclosure. I kept the piece of flyer he shoved into my pipe. Framed it in a small shadow box. Not out of pride, but as a reminder. Some people don't understand boundaries until they're forced to. He tried to drown me in my own home, but I held my ground. And I made damn sure he'd never forget it.